Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. Welcome to Industry Insights, episode 68, Jason. 68.
8. That's a lot of fingers.
Getting up there. Today, we're going to do something that's kind of interesting. But before we actually get into today's content, we thought we'd riff on some interesting things happening at Veeam really this entire week. So we've got this stream today. We'll tell you about a Veeam update that we'll be doing in certain geographies in the middle of the week. And then we'll close with what we'll be doing on Friday as well. But before we go too far, I want to invite you, wherever you're tuning in from. I see we've already got a comment in there. Give us a shout out where you may be tuning in from globally. Even if you're watching this on replay, meaning not live, feel free to chat in there. We've got the production team. Jason's in Texas. We've got Mark in Georgia. I'm in Colorado. We already have a shout out from Montana, which might be a first, Jason, I believe.
Nice.
First in our 68 episodes. And we've got our partner in crime, Catronel, over in Romania as well, that's keeping an eye on everything, all things social. So be sure to put a comment in there. Or if you have a question or comment about the content of what we're doing, feel free to enter that as well. We have people monitoring that, and we can get back to you there. So Jason, Veeam, before the world became an interesting place and continues to be so, we used to get together live for Veeam Ons.
And I miss that. Those were good days. Yeah.
And, what we started doing in the fourth quarter is some sort of, Veeam Live, Veeam Update. So what we're actually going to be doing is Veeam Update. And if we hit our first slide, some of this presentation activity that you're going to be seeing here, you're going to have our boss, the collective boss of myself and Jason, Danny Allen, our Chief Technology Officer, doing a global update on the state of the business, but he will sneak peek be announcing a brand new product as well. We've got all of the typical folks, Jason, myself, our buddy Rick, Melissa, Anthony, Michael, you name it, lots of people in there. And it's going to be very short and condensed. It's actually only 4 hours in total, a couple hours end user facing, a couple hours partner oriented. Comes up October 13th in the Americas, and then October 14th in Asia Pacific, Japan, and EMEA. And Jason, as we always do, we've got our demos lined up. I've seen some of the activity or scripts for those demos. They're absolutely killer.
Yeah, I get to be Melissa Palmer's co-host and straight man for her demo on the new version of Orchestrator. Super, super jazzed for that.
Outstanding. And I just want to give a little peek at some of the production value. Jason and I did some remote recording, but there is actual on-site recording. What you see here is a $1 million LED board in sort of a curved nature. They can see two cameras in front and a boom camera. That is Rick Vanover and one of our customers, Nico. But we did some pretty neat production value. We know everyone's a little virtual, evented, fatigued, etc. out. So we wanted to make not only the content interesting, the time frame crisp and short, but kind of bring up a better A game in terms of presentation as well. So with that as a backdrop,
head back to Denver after you're done, please. Tell me.
Yeah. It's carry-onable. It's no big deal. You just have to disassemble it into a couple of pieces.
Nice.
It's pretty neat stuff, though. It's pretty, and believe it or not, Jason, it doesn't get hot. You would think as bright as it is. I mean, even on the back, it's only about that thick. It doesn't get hot. So cool stuff there. But Jason, speaking of cool stuff, if we transition into today's topic around data sprawl, before we even really get going, I just want to get your thoughts. Sprawl or data sprawl, I feel like we could have teleported back in time a number of years and still had this conversation.
Yeah, for as long as you and I have both been backing stuff up, the idea of production data sprawl, and then also the and production data sprawl typically comes from heterogeneity of the production applications. Certainly, that's the biggest factor. But then we also see that as organizations have grown, they typically will grab little data protection tools over here, little data tools over there, different regions doing different things, different business units doing different things, and then, oh, by the way, backups plus snapshots plus replication, right? So 3 different kinds of tools from multiple different vendors across a heterogeneous part of environment. And then you wonder why some data is overprotected and other data is underprotected. And so I think that would be an interesting topic. This is a one-off for us today, just talking about the kinds of things that you and I visit with CXOs on every week.
Yeah, whether it's data criticality, data sprawl, these are things that we've been talking about. And I used to actually, many moons ago, when I was on the vendor side, so that's going back some 15 plus 18 years, I used to apologize because it seemed like every vendor in our space began with a slide that basically said, data's growing and the world's getting more complex. And my apology is, the apology is, I'm sorry, but this is actually true. And here we are nearly 2 decades later, and it's still actually true, isn't it?
It is. So data is growing. That's great, but that little pithy comment always assumes linear growth, right? And when you think about the kinds of tools, and we go from now just data center, at least the data center, you could have one hero backup, one hero storage, and you're kind of done, right? Now in a multi-hybrid cloud world, it's growing not only non-linearly but exponentially on different platforms. And then the tool sprawl happens because of that as well.
Yeah, and I feel like as our data has borne out, we commission things faster than we fully decommission things. So we still have a couple of Unix boxes, and some of us may have many. We still have mainframe at play. We still have everything in the data center, and we've got now everything at the edge, remote office. We've got everything in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing a pretty good job on the supply side of sprawl, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, we're not doing ourselves any favors. That's true.
So let's tee up our first slide. It's really our kind of overall vision and strategy slide that we use here at Veeam, and it's kind of our lens for how we see things. So if we click that up, no surprise, data is where we start with. It's the center of our universe. We first ingest that data from a protection perspective. And of course, that's what Veeam is well known for, backup and replication. So we ingest data from a backup perspective, software-based replication, continuous data protection, array integrations, et cetera. No surprises there. But once we have the data in the Veeam platform, we can layer on management capabilities, policy-based data services. Some in the industry refer to this as being able to deliver digital trust, whether that's monitoring and analytics, such as ransomware anomalies is but one good example. Automation and orchestration, orchestration near and dear to your heart. Jason, you and Melissa speak quite a bit on our disaster recovery orchestration platform. But then governance, compliance, and integrations. Probably neither of those two things, meaning the protect side of the equation or the manage component of that, sound revolutionary. Although underneath the covers, we do believe that we've got a number of unique capabilities. Just double clicking on or unpacking these icons that you see if you're going left to right, that cloud, because we write our data in a portable format, we can deliver multi-cloud, hybrid cloud data portability. And because 11 years ago now, Veeam pioneered instant recovery, we offer what we call data labs, or the ability to instantly mount and leverage this data. We can now use backup for more than backup, meaning we can unleash the power of that data to deliver what some call digital dexterity or digital transformation. And Jason, I'll turn it over to you, but I always like to have one specific comment on digital transformation. For some, it's a buzzword and maybe they've heard it too much. I appreciate that viewpoint, but as an IT professional, we are all in the business of digital transformation, especially this last year and a half. And my comment that I always say is, much like we say Veeam is not a security company, but we play a role in your security practice, we are not in the digital transformation business. We do not know what your business or business unit's digital transformation initiative may be, but we do know that it's going to assume that you've got protected data, and we do know that you would like to leverage that data without impacting production.
Yeah, I think my catchphrase when I talk to folks about this is do more with your data than leave it in a box and wait for bad things to happen. right? So, the good news is bad things are going to happen, right? So stuff is going to break. Bad actors are going to do bad things. So you will get ROI. You will get to restore what you backed up. And so that's lovely. But do more with your data than just wait for bad things to happen, right? That's where unleashing really kind of comes into fray. But the thing I would point out, Dave, that I think a lot of folks maybe minimize when they look at this journey that most organizations are on is that you can only unleash that which you have managed, and you can only manage that which you have protected. So if you work that way backwards, but oh, by the way, every protection method, the more varied or more sprawled those protection tools are, the more vectors you have. Like you can't manage with Veeam what you protected with Veritas. You can't unleash with IBM what you protected with Dell. I mean, so the root source is where all the goodness happens. Once you fix that, then you get to do all these other really cool things.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that. And, really, this is intended to be a journey. Not everyone has to go fully left to fully right. And certain workloads may warrant more or less of this capability. But that's why we refer to it as, in our case, the Veeam platform, although this could easily be a non-Veeam discussion and slide as well. And that probably tees up our Sprawl conversation nicely. Take us through some of that.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk through when folks are trying to get to this journey. A lot of times, what I hear is how do you start? I mean, this is a great slide. It's aspirational. In fact, I love the fact that there's actually nothing Veeamy about this particular slide. This is what most large organizations want to do. They want to protect. Ideally, they aspire to manage, and then they hope to be able to unleash. Let's go to the next slide, because when customers ask me, how do you actually get this done? It's really about a three-phased approach. The first phase that I think a lot of folks really need to fixate on is just making sure that everything's protected somehow, right? I go into so many environments today where they realize that, oh, I'm not protecting Office 365 yet because maybe it's natively durable, or I've got these new workloads that I'm standing up and I'm still trying to get the kinks out of the production side, so I haven't invested any time in the protection of those workloads yet. So I would tell you first and foremost, and I do a lot of work with scouts and in first aid, when we teach that merit badge, we teach the first thing you do is triage, right? The very first thing you need to be doing here is making sure that everything is protected somehow, and then we'll improve it from there. When we talk about the journey, we're looking at phase 3, right? So in fact, let's just go to the next version of the same slide where you can see that phase 1 and phase 2 is, let's just call it just backup, right? Make sure everything's protected. Ideally, you standardize on it. And then all the cool stuff, Dave, that you mentioned is in what happens only after you're assured that you have protection and recovery. What are your thoughts on this part of the lens?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the backup should be a given, right? While there are differences in how the various providers accomplish that, I think phase 1 is make the data protected, make it available, and basically bring it into the platform or ecosystem such that you can get onto these additional policy-based services as it makes sense. It shouldn't be prescriptive. It shouldn't require you to do certain things unless you choose to, would like to. But I like the phased notion of this. I'm a big believer, if we kind of go back to our roots, meaning pre-Veeam, when we were both industry analysts,
Right.
That's a very logical way to approach this from a risk reduction perspective, from an asset management, capital planning perspective. Don't sweep the floor and seek to do 100% new overnight. Do this in a phased approach that makes sense.
Yeah, and before we kind of dig in the phases, I would just maybe offer this to the folks at home. We talk a lot about phase 1, right? So you've got all these new workloads coming, and as you've mentioned, workloads are coming online faster than old workloads are being decommissioned, right? So we spend a lot of time focused on just making sure that phase 1 is everything backupable, is everything restorable, right? And then we have all the aspirational stuff that we all want to do, right? Governance, compliance, cyber preparedness, hybrid agility, unlocking more value out of the data, everything in phase 3. A lot of people miss how critical to your strategy phase 2 is. But before we go to phase 2, how about we go to the map? Let's see what's going on.
Okay, so we mentioned Montana. We've got Florida, where I hope to be 2 weeks from today. Maryland as well. We don't see Maryland all that often, so that's awesome. If
I was
we
kind of hoping to see if Alabama was on the map because my beloved Texas Aggies beat Alabama on Saturday, and wanted to say hi to anyone from there that might have been going in, still saying "Roll Tide," but no one's weighed in from Alabama this morning.
Yeah, I thought of you on Saturday. That is a major, major upset, boy. And now over in Europe, France, Belgium, Spain, Romania, Netherlands, and UK. Thank you there. Brazil.
Always
Jason's
love
always
when the
happy.
Brazilians are in the house.
Yep,
Good food, and a big chunk of the world turns green.
yep. And we've got Indonesia, Vietnam, India, Cameroon as well. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, look at all that. That's awesome.
Love that. Yeah, please keep piling on. And also, one of the reasons we talk about data sprawl is especially in larger enterprises, you'll see that different business units or perhaps different geo units, the APJ team picks different tools than the Europe team than the Americas. So as you're piling on, I'd love to hear from the folks in the chat. Are you seeing geographic sprawl where different people are picking different tools? Sometimes that's also related to regulations as well. And that's going to bring us right back into the slides where we were talking about earlier. So we talk about phase one, right? That's about backup. We talk about phase three. That's all the aspirational stuff. In between there is that little bitty magic word called standardize. Let's go ahead and bring that up because I think that that's a problem statement, Dave, that, I mean, you've entertained so many enterprise conversations over the years. We hear a lot of angst where the central IT folks are saying, we got to reduce the number of tools. We want to do standardization of policies. Meanwhile, the local IT folks in the business units are saying, yeah, but nobody knows my data better than I do. And I've got these different requirements. No, by the way, I already bought this other stuff. Why should I have to change? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right. I like how you phrase this and how this slide exemplifies this. You've got some tension here in what could, on the face of it, be sort of competing notions. Centralization from an IT perspective, meaning corporate, they want everything to be as cookie cutter as possible, as similar as possible. And there's a lot of merit to that. You can get some definite economies of scale in terms of your pricing, but you also get a way to administer global policy. Your notion, though, Jason, here's what I'd like to tee up and get your thoughts on from the federated business unit side there over on the right. No, but we've got something that's different. We have something that's unique. Are many workloads that unique anymore? Meaning, I could almost assert that we see a collapsing of the uniqueness of some of these workloads, or at least the number that we used to have is not as varied, meaning we've got so many workloads that are now deemed mission critical. We don't have tier 1 through 5. We only have a couple of tiers, could be one of the examples. What are your thoughts?
So I totally agree with you on that. That I think we are seeing there's less secret sauce,
Yeah.
special handling that has to be done for a lot of these workloads over time. Honestly, one of the things I think is really going to force some of that standardization is the more and more that organizations embrace SaaS and PaaS, right? Because that now you've got a global tool that's available. And so then you can start asking kind of some hard questions on, do I really need the local business unit people to use perhaps antiquated or legacy tool sets to protect what's a modern and globally accessible production platform, right? So if somebody embraces Office 365, right, that it's the same tool, geo-wide. So now let's go ahead and standardize the tools for each of those new SaaS platforms. And so maybe as folks are modernizing their workloads, that is also a driver for consolidating their data protection tool sets while they're at it.
I like that notion. And, you've always been one to say when you modernize production, you need to modernize protection. So as you are changing your workloads, and speaking of other kinds of changes, even though it's been a somewhat challenging year and a half from a global economic perspective, we've seen a lot of merger and acquisition activity take place. That can be one of the arguably external/internal change agents that could drive revisiting what your corporate policy is as it relates to availability.
I think there's a huge opportunity there. So when you go through an M&A type event, so now, a big fish has bought a smaller fish, there's a merger of two organizations, however you want to think about that. I think the opportunity is if you come from a backup admin pedigree, if you're used to working those tools, you understand the data. You understand that corporate landscape. And so since you don't have to necessarily still be in charge of the backup tool, there's a great career trajectory opportunity there, a career growth opportunity to say, look, if I'm in the acquired instead of the acquirer, then this is my chance to actually step out of the backup admin role into more of the BCDR planning roles, into those roles that talk about unleashing the value of data, focus more on monitoring, right? Let the new corporate IT guy, let them be responsible for the tactical backup stuff, right? Centralize the tool set, deploy the new tools out there, basically get out of that backup function and start adding more strategic value now that you understand how the data lays within your given part of the world. I think M&A is actually a really interesting opportunity to help standardize the tool set, gain some efficiencies of scale, and frankly, evolve your career path out of just the backup-centric role.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that. And back from industry analyst days, I had a colleague on the storage array side, so the storage hardware side, but it's just equally as applicable in my mind to our conversation here, which was don't be wedded to past decisions. So in other words, if you make a change going forward, it wasn't that you were wrong in the past, it's that things may have evolved or changed around you. M&A is but a great example of that. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you implemented a certain set of tools that was, state of the art most likely at the time. Now it's time to revisit that, and you get an event like merger and acquisition. It's a very, very good forcing function to say, how can we up-level our hand? What can we do to improve our data position?
Yeah, your example in storage is a great one, right? So we see that same kind of evolution where, one side of the house was using Dell, the other side of the house was using HPE. When they come together, they start wanting to standardize the tool sets. The tools that you bought were probably the right tools X number of years ago, but nothing lasts forever. And if you're going to go ahead and do an up level, and by the way, these days, a lot of those up levels are pretty disruptive anyway, why not do some standardization while you're there? And then that way it's all centrally managed. You have two sets of eyeballs now focusing on these things. And again, now you can then step out of that role into something more and more interesting to the business from that. So great example there.
Yeah, and if I think about, this data sprawl notion, I think it's safe to say no one's going to probably make a bet that sprawl is going to suddenly decelerate anytime in the near future. So the goal really has to be, how can you incrementally put yourself in a better position to better leverage the data, recognizing that, and I always hate this phrase because we've lived it for now so long, the new normal is going to be constant change and basically constant data sprawl.
Let's just focus, kind of wrap up our time on the topic, but focus on that goal area. I wish we could zoom in all the way into just that magic green box in the middle, because really the goals between what central IT wants to do in standardization and what the federated or geographically distributed business units want to try to achieve from a high SLA perspective, these are not really competing goals, right? It's just how do we get more consistent for the greater good? And so if you focus on I love our
nice.
Here's the measure of success. Can you be more responsive to the business needs, regardless of whether you are corporate or whether you are distributed? Can you gain economies of scale by standardizing those tools, right? Reducing that total cost of ownership. Love the fact that you get skills standardization, right? Dave, you have preached for years on this single biggest factor often slowing down digital transformation is legacy skills and legacy tools, right? So standardize on those as you're uplifting. Consistent SLAs, right? So as you move within this larger organization, as people are apt to do, wouldn't it be nice that you knew that your data was consistently protected and consistently recoverable, regardless of where you went through the org? And then lastly, if we go all the way back, and let's zoom back out of this and go right back to that first slide. Once you've solved for phase one, which was backup everything, and once you've solved for standardization, let's go back to that very first slide, then you get to do this journey. And this is a journey worth doing.
Yeah, and a great comment came in from a user or viewer named Jason also. Jason, he says, yeah, absolutely. The industry changes so fast these days that the thing you deployed and you took just a couple of years ago into your environment may not be the most secure or the best for the company. And, one of the things I've always noticed,
so smart. They are.
Right, it's something in the name. And, one of the things I've always noticed when an organization goes through a backup modernization activity, it's very interesting how 2-3 years later, they are finding themselves in yet another backup modernization activity. And I always think it's not because the team didn't know what to do prior. It's that they weren't allowed to do the things that they wanted to do 100% prior.
Wow, there is so much goodness in that phrase. I love that, Dave. They weren't allowed, right? So if you were a regional person in a regional office and you were going off a shoestring of a data protection budget, then all of a sudden you get bought by somebody who actually understands the value of data and the importance of downtime and data loss. All of a sudden you get to use tools that are better than what you were allowed to use last year, and things just get better. It is a journey worth going on.
It is. That's right. A journey worth going on. As we begin to wind down, thank you, everyone who gave a shout out from where you're viewing from. Thank you, Jason T., for your comment. Do want to remind everyone, a quick commercial. Enjoy it if you would register for Veeam Update. I think there's a lot of good information in there. Not just the sessions that Jason and I are doing, but some great demos, a brand new product announcement that's going to come up. It's a very short amount of time. You can pick and choose the sessions that are most for you and your wheelhouse. And of course, we'll have these persisting. You can come back and check out some of the other things at your leisure, time permitting later on. And this Friday, our colleague Rick Vanover will give a kind of a recap in 30 minutes of all the things that have happened and we're demoed and we're announced is kind of our Friday Tech Bites update. So encourage everyone to check that out. I'm going to be hosting our Senior Vice President of Cloud Products, Andy Langsam, next Monday. And then Jason will be flying solo Monday after that while I am hopefully in Florida.
Nice.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Be sure to check out Veeam Update. Thank you for the comments. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.